Literary Festival. My name is Alfred Nicole. I'll introduce our first reader, Midge Goldberg. Midge Goldberg's most recent book, To Be Opened After My Death, was published by Kelsey Books in August 2021. She is the editor of the upcoming anthology, Outer Space, 100 Poems, to be published by Cambridge University Press in the fall of 2022. Mitch, the stage is yours.
Hi, Alfred. Thank you very much. I'm so thrilled to be here. I'd love to be there eating Gina's delicious pastries and breakfast, but since I can't, I'm in the second best place. I'm at King Arthur Baking outside in this lovely, lovely Vermont day. I'm gonna start with, since we just celebrated some holidays, I'm gonna start with a Passover poem. This is the story of, interesting. This is the story of Moses. The poem is called Pharaoh's Daughter. Moses was put into a basket as a baby because Pharaoh was killing all of the Jewish children, and Pharaoh's daughter rescued him from the river. All right, Pharaoh's daughter. Really? I find a baby in the water? I've got to know my father's killing Jews. And then some girl appears? Dutiful daughter, loving sister, there with helpful news. She might just know a wet nurse for the baby? What am I? Awkward plot device? Convenient miracle? Much later, they say, maybe it was an act of faith, and they are lenient. Marry me off. Give me a name. Screw you, Batya, daughter of God. I'm Moses's mother. Skinned knees, homework, and then one day he knew and left behind our life to lead another. I always had a future and a past. It's only God who made me seem half-assed. The next poem, since I get so many comments about, oh, I can't read your book, it's to be opened after my death and I don't want to bring any bad luck, I'm just going to read that poem so everyone knows it's not me. This is a letter, and maybe there's some clues along the way to figure out who the letter writer is. To be opened after my death. To all the women of my generation, my dresses, hats, the gloves, the high-heeled shoes were always pinks and reds, though I liked blues. The color, they said, added animation. They had me marry for my reputation. I did, without an inkling I could choose. There was a time, a Caribbean cruise. I had to be a symbol for the nation. But there's another tale I couldn't tell, of when I disappeared in the war years. A combat signals unit codenamed Spouse. We signaliers all listened in on hell. I grew to dread those words, put on your ears. It's time you knew. Minerva, Minnie, Mouse. So even though the title isn't about me, the book does seem to have a lot of death in it. So I'm gonna go to this next poem. It was a day I was sitting in our backyard, I think it was my birthday, and I was watching a snapping turtle make its way across our backyard. The March of Time. My heart begins to race in turtle time, watching him lumber closer, a slow pace, more nerve-wracking than speed. This birthday, I'm relaxing here and trying not to trace the march of time. I watch him lift a foot. I think I could go make a cup of tea and all the time it takes for him to put it down again. And now he's watching me. There must be something that seems slow to turtles, the way I wait for his blinks endlessly. Rock time, evolutionary hurdles, marvels I live too fast to even see. But me with my, he with his turtled eye, we watch the same infinities blink by. This poem is a free verse poem. I went on a trip out to Utah and was just amazed, as I'm sure everyone is, by the landscape there. It's called Contours. Canyon, deep, jagged, the shape of water. Rock, tall, rounded, the shape of wind. Everything is the shape of something gone by. Canyon, water, rock, wind, absence, the shape left behind. So when traveling, last time I traveled to Vermont, actually, I was going along and then suddenly the GPS cut out and I didn't know where I was, but luckily, like being old, I had a paper map in the car, I pulled it out. But then I started to ponder the difference between those two things. So this is a poem with two parts. Directions. Paper map. The map is blind to where you are. Mountain, valley, center, edge. You could be anywhere. Your car parked along this road, that ledge. You have to find yourself. Recall the many twists and turns you took, the signs you barely saw. How small you are on paper. Get out and look. GPS. That's you, that dot, right in the middle, not lost at all. Wherever you go, there you are. Oh, maybe you fiddle with routes, but you follow yourself. You know. Mountains, rivers, towns, slide on and off this map of you, your glassed-in world that needs no north, no dawn, no nightfall. You steer safely past. And then you get there, where it's clear you've been all along. What you went through? Pointless to care. It's always here, it's always now, it's always you. On that same trip out to Utah, I ran into this. I also have some Mormon friends who told me about a dish they eat. They just mentioned it casually. Oh, we're having funeral potatoes for dinner. And I was like, what? You have a dish called funeral potatoes? So they explained it to me and I wrote this poem. Funeral potatoes. A Mormon dish called funeral potatoes, ubiquitous and creamy, full of cheese, appears at every family funeral. No Mormon dies without a side of these. They fill a spot on all the mourners' plates, next to the slaws and casseroles and meat. And as the dead approach the pearly gates, the living do their part, they sit and eat. My question on this lumpy sustenance: how did it start? As food or something more? A humble symbol, earthly, blind, and dense? A Mormon's not so gourmet metaphor? Or maybe it's that any time of year, potatoes are just what there was at hand, rattling around a farmhouse bin somewhere, or scrabbled from the dusty promised land. And just by dint of sheer dull repetition, a funeral a month for years on end, potatoes gained this deathly reputation. What started as a meal became a trend. Regardless, here they are, loaded with meaning. Someone you love just died. To make it through, maybe a potato's what you need to serve as comfort when no words will do. I did want to give a little shout out to Melissa Balmain, where a number of these poems appeared. And also thank the people who wrote the comments in the back. Rachel Haddis, who I know is here. Thank you, Rachel. And Leslie Mansour and Anton Yakovlev also blurbed the back of the book, and just lovely, lovely comments. I'm so thrilled that they were able to do that. Last two poems, since this is breakfast, we have one about coffee and then one about baking. When I was with my daughter in New York, and we were in a coffee shop, and I saw a young woman go up to a counter and order sort of a soy, half calf, something latte. And then her date behind her came up and said, sugar, heavy cream. And I went, wow, they're never gonna make it. So I wrote this poem. It's called Brooklyn Personals. Soy milk seeking coffee mate. Almond substitutes are great. So are coconut or rice. Hemp would certainly suffice. Fridge is tiny, bills are high. Only want one milk to buy. Half and half need not apply. And for my last poem, there are a series of in poems in this book. They're from the perspective of different people, fictional characters who work at the inn. And this one, since I'm at a baking school and about to take a baking class, this is called The Baker. This is my last poem. Baker. Alarm is set for 4. I'm sorry, there's one other thing. It's confusing, but this is from the point of view of a man. I know because I'm reading it, you might get something else in your head. So this is a gentleman speaking. Alarm is set for 4. It was our dream. We'd move up here when we retired, a farmhouse, small, where she and I could garden, write. The kids would come to visit, send the grandkids. A porch where we could sit and watch the mountains. All fine, then 9 months in, she found the lump. So yeah. I wandered through the house for weeks, just touching things. The kids came up. They tried to help. I sent them home with promises. I figured I could start with something easy, her cookbooks, not my thing. I could get rid of those. I pulled the first one off the shelf, sat down. There on the cover was the challah she'd bake for holidays, nice dinners, or the kids. The book fell open to the page, flour splotched, wrinkled. She always did make such a mess. I never baked stuff. I was on the grill, steaks, burgers, or lasagna for the kids. But as I read the steps, I thought perhaps I'd try. I finally found the yeast, the fridge. The rest was pretty easy: flour, salt, sugar, water, eggs. It was the kneading I liked, the working, then the feel of, I don't know, the dough felt warm, alive. I left it rising in the bowl, was thrilled. Yes, me, the big attorney, actually thrilled to come back later, see how it had grown. A gust of breath when I just punched it down, the rising up against that punch, and then the baking, and it turned to bread. I know, what else? And yes, actual bread. I tore a hunk, she'd never let me do that, and ate it, leaning up against the counter. I figured, why not? Branched out, made her pinwheels, some rolls, and then a sack retort we'd had on some vacation once. I heard her voice. I missed her, but I didn't miss her nagging, telling me to watch my weight, clean up, give some to the neighbors. They had kids. So when I saw the sign for bakers needed, I took some bread and cake down to the inn. They wanted some experience, but I convinced them that they should give me a chance. At least my legal skills were good for something. It didn't hurt that they were desperate. Now I get up at 4, head to the inn, make myself a coffee, and get started. I like the moment every morning when the dough begins to live beneath my hands. The smell of fresh baked cookies, big and warm. The kids whose eyes are round like chocolate chips, waiting for me to wrap it in wax paper, hand it straight to them and make their day. Geez, who's talking here? Is this still me? I like it. It's not fascinating, but at least it gets me out of bed. It's good. Maybe not forever, but for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Midge, for getting us off to such a nice start. Don Kimball, whose first full-length book of poetry, Late Autumn Raking, was published by Kelsey Books in 2021. He has 3 earlier chapbooks. Don is a long-standing member of the Powow River Poets in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and is currently the workshop moderator. He tries to moderate us, but it doesn't work. All yours.
Thanks, Alfred. I really appreciate it. And I also am very appreciative of the blurbs I got on the back of my book from Rena, Deborah Warren, and Michael Cantor. I'm going to start with some early favorites and then fast forward to the title poem and several new poems. This one is probably the oldest poem in the book. It's called Ursula Sleeps Upstairs. And it's a short one that evolved out of some family stories that I heard, particularly between my father and his older brother. Ursula sleeps upstairs in her late mother's old room, terminally ill with a similar disease, ready now for the final reunion. All her summer hats put away. In her dreams, Aunt Louise rides a quarter horse at full gallop, racing the Boston and Maine along tracks now long forgotten, past the Order of the Sacred Heart, where blue nuns are prayer walking, and a small cemetery in back where her mother lies in waiting. This next poem is a blank verse poem, and it is based on an actual event that happened in downtown Concord. I wasn't there to see it, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, but I did read about it in the paper. Deer in a craft shop. It might have been the early morning light that caught her eye while she dashed down a one-way street that night, persuading her to cross a wide divide, where later in the day she would have had to wobble in the sun for speeding cars to stop before she dared to trot the crosswalk. Now, beguiled by some random need, she strides the four-lane street, smashing through glitter into shards of glass and leaping down not onto moss or leaves, but the astonished sales floor. Mouths agape, the city road crew stand outside to watch while the white-tailed doe negotiates a labyrinth of narrow aisles. "Oh no, there goes another vase," yells one of them. She stops behind a shiny case, as if gazing with longing at a silver bracelet, appraising the delicacy of her plight when light, that winking light, bewilders her, invites her back to thrash some inner darkness where she attempts to vault a jeweler's bench and leaps with a shatter of window panes into the blinding glare. A wounded doe falling 2 stories to a parking lot, hobbling a trail of blood and broken vases. After that, here's a lighter poem. It's a series of haiku that are strung together to create a narrative poem that I got from reading a memoir written by a park ranger. So, of course, the poem is titled Park Ranger. Warm, dry, and dusty, the wind picks up, rumbling in your ears. An amber haze billows between you and the scattered birch trees beyond the cobbled beach. Hobbling on pebbles, you step inside this burnished cloud, a mass migration of wings. These lucky lady beetles almost endlessly swarm, undulating on the canyon, up the canyon on the wind. One by one, they tick your stiff, broad-brimmed hat, landing on your shirt, crawling on your sleeves. You turn, facing these tiny migrants. Do you feel them flow over you slowly? Autumn's afternoon, sun glowing through a million wings like saffron robes. And now for the title poem, Late Autumn Raking. As sunlight falls behind the trees, a brumal wind battles all the browned out leaves, winding them up for a fall. At break of day, the dead leaves a tattered bed. I rake them all into smoldering heaps, wheezing while I claw those harried stragglers hissing from under windowsills, skittering like mice along the pocked foundation, or lying low between the knurled toes of an old oak. By nightfall, the sidewalk swells with sheaves, demanding all these leaves recall where they belong. Okay, this next poem is about electronics that I am eternally frustrated by. I love them when they work, and when they don't, I can't figure out how to fix them. It's called The Subwoofer's Denouement. Several times you give it a whack. That big black box, an old Best Buy, plunked behind a lackluster lazy boy, still woofing, woofing. You fiddle with dials, symbols barely legible, but it won't stop woofing. Why did I buy this crap device? You unplug it, count to 30, then plug it in again. That woofaloggin grunting on and on, a gorilla in your woof box trying to break out, only now it's after midnight. Someone's banging on your door. Hey, shut the fuck up. And you're stuck. Despite the long commute, bootstrapping, shit jobs, college loans, a rainy day startup trying to reboot a piece of junk in a seedy Airbnb in Kissimmee. Okay, now for a little bit wilder poem. I assume that most people have had some problems with sleeping during their lives or insomnia. I certainly have, and I decided to write these next two poems about it. This one is kind of comes out of the frustration that I would have from staying up and not being able to sleep. Sleep wide awake. When sleep stays up for the late night shows, her long blonde hair gone to weeds, mocking Wall Street bozos, yawping like crows on her wall-sized TV. When sleep sees night folding into day, with Taya's glare upcasting the shades, decreeing her sleep a castaway, rolling off the couch to swirl herself away inside a sleeping bag on the cold basement floor. When sleep's raccoon eyes are stinging, squinting deep into the Stygian darkness of yet another 4, 5, or 6 in the morning. When sleep's sudden shiver hauls her up, recalling what seems like only yesterday, that final exam at Old Main, her rumpled PJs casting a pall over the crowded study hall as she's stumbling in, falling into a desk chair. When sleep tweets her sister Claire, "I can't keep doing this," binging a box of fried clams, milkshakes, day-old pastries. When sleep burps a record-breaking burp and eats her Prius for dessert, leaving the rubber wheels like crumbs on a plate, hawking, then feeling a seismic grumble in her stomach. When sleep hurls up the night. Well, I have to leave you at least with a antidote for this. And it's called Blue. It's my last poem. Ambience, not the fix. Nix that strain of bright blue lights, flat screen, iPhone, tablet, laptop, eyes transfixed, stealing your sleep, getting you blue, heavy-lidded, paddling day long along the river Styx. Ambience, not the fix. Consider this instead, a soothing shower, slide into bed. Picture a parade of elephants lumbering across the savannah, a mesmerizing murmuration of starlings confiding in the darkening sky, a school of dolphins leaping side by side, surfing the sunlit tide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Wonderful reading. Wonderful reading. I'd never heard that poem of yours about the ladybugs. Terrific. So our next reader is Jean L Krieling, the prize-winning author of 3 books of poems: The Truth in Dissonance, published in 2014, Arts and Letters and Love, published in 2018, and Shared History, which came out this year. A Powow River Poet since 2013, she is also Professor Emeritus of Music at Bridgewater State University and an Associate Poetry Editor for Able Muse, a review of poetry, prose, and art. And we're proud to have her be a member of the Powow River Poets.
And good morning, everyone. And many thanks to all of you who are spending some of your Saturday morning with us. My new book, Shared History, begins with a section that addresses the theme of persistence from a variety of angles. For example, here is a rondo about 2 especially persistent outlaws. This poem takes its title from the film that inspired it, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. 2 outlaws run, but never lose their cool. They make their white hat foe look like a fool. Still handsome after their long, frantic ride, our boys leap from a cliff, sure suicide that they survive. While Sundance goes to school in Etta's arms, Butch lets his wit unspool on 2 wheels, unafraid of ridicule, and 3 hearts laugh. But all that charm won't hide 2 outlaws. Run still farther, that's the desperado's rule. Their chances of survival minuscule. They try Bolivia, all 3 allied in crime, but Etta leaves. She can't abide the risks. At last, exposed by 1 damned mule, 2 outlaws run. Excuse me. Next, a somewhat more sober example of persistence. This is a sonnet called Faith. Dark robes, bright hopes, and words that live or die according to the Spirit that may move or not move those who pray and don't ask why they come each Sunday. All of this may prove that faith survives, or it may prove the force of habit, or the galling rule of guilt, or good behavior. Kids learn not to horse around in pews their parents' tithes have built. Some people come here out of loneliness, while others bow their heads in mortal fear. One needs a place to wear a favorite dress. Another shows up every week to hear the anthem. So the preacher does his best, not always sure just whom or what he's blessed. Another section of the book is called Sea Sonnets. Here's one of those called Memorial for Ben. Ben swam against the tide for many years and wrestled currents that he knew would take his breath away. He spat out pain and fears and made more of his life than most men make. And he made stalwart friends who now have come, as he'd requested, to this chilly shore where he grew up. They weep and hug, and some tell stories. There's a toast. Then one thing more they do for Ben. They dive into the sea, most laughing, each one with a fist clenched tight. Boys in their 50s, mourning, but with glee, illuminated by the slanting light of summer's end and braced against the cold by love for him whose ashes they all hold. Some of the shared history in this book is very personal history, like that poem, In Memory of a Friend, and this one called Inheritance. It was at first my mother's ring, and then somehow it skipped a generation and was my sister's. Subtly shimmering, it was a delicate old world creation that I thought would have looked good on my hand. 3 tiny diamond chips set in a small etched silver oblong on a golden band. Although we laughed about it, I recall my jealousy. That heirloom was the one I'd coveted, a wish I didn't hide, but her slim finger wore it well. In fun, she said she'd leave it to me when she died.
Oh, God.
I wear it every day now, and I guess there's nothing that I've ever wanted less. My father, my late father, was born on this date, and so in remembrance of him, I'll read this villanelle called My Father's Voice. Sometimes it seemed as if his voice alone fixed almost everything. Authority and wisdom sang in his rich baritone. More crooning cello than boastful trombone, its deep notes pulsed with warmth and empathy, and none who heard it ever felt alone. In speeches, meetings, even on the phone, he could persuade his staunchest enemy to hear the truth in his rich baritone. It often rang with wit, jokes at his own expense, bad puns, masterful parody, sly riddles, and he never laughed alone. It still commanded me when I was grown. I counted on that sound to help me see. I heard the truth in his rich baritone. Untuned by illness, That voice learned to moan in pain. It rasped and sighed with frailty. I held his hand, and he was not alone when death at last silenced his baritone. Next, I'm going to read a poem from the travel section of my book. And first, I'm going to display the cover again because it features a photograph of the Salisbury Crags in Edinburgh, Scotland, which inspired this poem. A couple of explanatory notes. First, the poem mentions Arthur's Seat, which is the tallest of these crags or hills, possibly associated with King Arthur. Some claim this is the site of the mythical Camelot. And the poem also mentions a wind off the River Forth. This is a rondo called the Salisbury Crags. Along these crags, near Arthur's Seat, you watch your own slow tourist feet connect the dots of random stones, sidestepping falls and broken bones. Then you look up and see complete an epic realm. Green hillsides meet a gray stone castle. Down the street, a palace preens. A fourth wind moans along these crags, chastising those who fear defeat by pebbly paths. Small perils greet the hiker, while time's rigor hones a city's pride. The thistle throne's high heather nods, and lost hearts beat along these crags. And finally, a poem I wrote after a trip I took with a bunch of girlfriends. We have known each other for more decades than we'd like to confess. And to mark a certain milestone birthday, we took a cruise together. So this is Girls' Cruise. At Playa Uvas, Cozumel, we kayaked, although not too well. With greater expertise, we shopped and showed yet more skill as we hopped from spa to bar to beach, then back to bar. Tequila shots and Jack and Ginger had beguiling charms. So did the barkeep's muscled arms. We really liked repeating si and uno mas, but finally, we made our way back to the dock. Our ship would sail at 10 o'clock. When midnight brought the big buffet, we all were fast asleep. Olé. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. Just a tremendous reading. That was wonderful. Our next reader is Zara Raab, who joined the Powow River Poets in 2019. The reissue of her terrific book, Swimming the Eel, in a new edition, adds many poems about the rural country where she was raised. Zara partnered with me to organize the poetry events for this year's Newburyport Literary Festival, and she's been a tremendous help.
I'm going to read just one poem from the new edition of, here it is, Swimming the Eel. If a person is thought of as a kind of garden, there are many corners and paths in a garden. And the poem I'll read derives from a remote corner, remote both in time and place, from my garden self. Yet it touches probably everything about me. The poem, Road Stop, is a dramatic dialogue with three people in an automobile. The driver is Gil, who smokes a pipe. Next to him is his wife, Laurel, who is none too happy about an impending visit from her mother-in-law, Lila. Napping in the backseat is Gil's sister, Maddie. The three of them are heading home to Gil and Laurel's house, where Gil's and his sister's parents, Laurel's parents-in-law, are waiting for them. And there is a small short story within this story told by the sister Maddie about an encounter decades before between their uncle and their father when they were children. It's really not that complicated, but here we go. Road stop out west. Gil leans into the steering, chest almost touching the wheel, and so maneuvers in and out of streaming cars, one hand missing fingertips from knuckles down. His wife looks on, ready to take the wheel. Did you speak to Lila today? Oh, you know I did. They are coming. They'll be there when we get home. She bends her head into her hands. Now. A pause before a blaze of ire. Hell's bells, what is the matter, girl? She purses her lips, says nothing. Suddenly, he brakes. The car slows with a jolt. Traffic is piling up. Can you pull off? I'd like to stop. A head pokes up from the back seat, a crop of gray, disheveled short. The woman speaks. What goes? Are we there yet? Relax, Maddie. The herd is going slow. We'll be in the Matol 2 hours from now. Go back to sleep. His wife looks back at Maddie, curled again upon the seat, knees bent, a handbag by her head, and says nothing. I had a little snooze. My, will you look at this? Now she does sit up. Like wartime San Diego, bumper to bumper, getting to the base. You need to stop, Maddie? No, I'm good. I heard you say you talked to Mom. She'll have arrived when we get there. She's bringing Dad, of course. He has to drive. Nowadays, she don't go anywhere without our dad. He hacked a rattling smoker's cough. Still leaning to the wheel, he spoke between the yellowed teeth that gripped the pipe. Laurel packs him into the spare room we've got. Plenty of room. You won't fuss now, sleeping in Kit's old room, will you? Laurel's in a tizzy to get us all bedded down. I'm not. You're the one that plans these things. Christ. And not giving me so much as a holler. Least you could do. She doesn't talk to me. Your mother shows up uninvited, comes as if she owns the place, and looks at things as if they all belong to her. They drive into the freeway's rushing sound of cars. He coughs and knocks the ash out of his pipe. They drive an hour in silence till at last the exits dwindle down to country lanes and passing cars are few and far between. Did you hear me? I'd like to stop now. She speaks as if no time at all had passed. But Maddie leans forward and speaks into Gil's ear. Did Mom tell you the time they first met up, the Clarks and the McGregor clan? You mean there at the homestead in Bear Creek? That's right. Granddad was low on horses when, he needed them to round the cattle up. Ain't I right? Right. So Granddad Clark and Knowles, our uncle, Lila's brother, Knowles. How old was Knowles when this went on? No more than 10. 10, a boy. So Granddad had him ride a horse to Sacramento by himself. No cash, just a pack of beef jerky. No inn between the coast and the Sierras. My. He rides all day. He's hungry. He's tired. He comes upon a cabin there, Bear Creek. He knocks, not knowing who or what will next appear. Alonzo's there. He fills the door, a bit wide-eyed. You know he painted pictures Frisco in the big earthquake. And kept a whiskey still, no doubt. Noel's given supper. Then he falls asleep, a fire in the grate to keep him warm. That's how they did it, Laurel. That's visiting. Laurel looks down and shakes her head. The dust begins to rise up through the trees. The hills move further on. He knocks his pipe, leans back. So that's how Knowles, 10 years old, met Dad, who must have been a teenager. Of course, when he got home again, Knowles told what he had seen. Said Dora served bear meat at supper time. At school, our dad couldn't live it down, not with old Clark. Given the usual fallouts of marriage, Lila was not above mentioning that bear meat. They gave Laurel a glance. A hollow stump, that's where our dad was born, and Laurel too. So she sure knows all that. Watch your driving, Gil. He stuffs the pipe, tobacco tumbling from a pouch onto his lap. He snuffles, coughs. My mom was taught by nuns. She knew Latin and algebra. An orphanage, was it? Mattie inquired. We kept a chicken coop, magnificent. Was us supplied the county houses with lamb in spring and wool for knitting things. We ate no bear, not once. Gil waggles and puffs his pipe. Smoke billows through the car. Mattie and Laurel crack their windows down and fan their faces noisily. Gil grins and hawks into a handkerchief. My turn. I want to drive. You've done enough. She grips the dash. Since leaving town behind, they have been riding fast. Pull over when you can. The roadsides now are yellow grass, ready for fire to come on raging through. Even the trees, some scraggly oaks, do seem to thirst. Yes, I'd like to stretch my legs. Good thing we filled the tank before we started out. There won't be anything for miles now, Mattie says from back. They rumble on and pass no other cars. Gil slips off the road as gravel pings against the car's alloy underbelly now. Then silence. Doors, front and back, thrown wide, now all edge out. Laurel first, then Gil, and then Mattie. He comes around the trunk to hawk and spit, and Mattie sways. With quick alacrity, Laurel slams her door and skirts around the hood, which feels quite hot to her light touch. Then she gets into the driver's seat and straps her belt, then turns the key and revs the engine up, and then, imagining what it could mean to drive away, she waves goodbye to them in her rear view, just where they stood, there by that country road. And then she revs the engine, and then she goes.
Thank you, Zara. I mean, we don't, with these online breakfasts, we don't have any muffins or anything, but we got a great big slice of the world delivered to us. Wonderful, wonderful narrative poem.
Thank you very much. And thank you, all the powwows. Thank all the readers in powwows. I really appreciate it. Okay, bye-bye, ciao.
And our next reader is Andrew Szilvasy, who is the author of the chapbook Witness Marks and has poems appearing or forthcoming in Cutbank, Barrow Street, Smartish Pace, Tar River Poetry, The Moth, and RHINO, among others. He lives in Boston with his wife.
Hi, everyone. I should actually update that. I just moved to Framingham. I saw someone in the chat in Framingham. I just kind of sent to Alfred my most recent bio, but clearly I need to work on that. Thank you all for inviting me here. This is my collection, Witness Marks. I'd like to thank Alfred and Rena for writing blurbs, and I saw Kathy Chandler in here, and I owe her a great thanks for giving it a read in its early stages. So I'm going to start with the title poem, and it's called Witness Marks. Before he died, my father left the carcass of a bird's eye maple table in the basement, witness marks all laid out for a drop leaf when the cancer came, smoothing the round edge of his paunch with its hand plane. Death gray, the fat man began to hate the smell of thyme and onion, the texture scallops. When my mother moved, we used it as a bier, one leg missing and the top barely proud of the apron, to remove the last alls and adzes from the cellar, bore them all up those long steps to the cold light and set them on our old sidewalk to wait for a stranger who might never show up. The next poem from the collection that I'm going to read is called Severed, and it is from an experience of having a get together in the backyard of my old place that was in Boston, and we had a wonderful neighbor, but unfortunately, this is, I think, the last sad poem I will read, so that we're not wallowing that when I could see sun coming through my roof. So, Severed. The widow brings her neighbors fresh clipped flowers, the same rhododendron blossoms she forgot she brought them yesterday. They'll bloom among the watermelon rinds and chicken bones, fitfully dragged to curbs in body bags, now more purple and more sweetly scented. This next piece is a take on the Kirtle sonnet. It's taking the Hopkins poem Pied Beauty and doing something a little different with it. Practiced beauty. High-cheeked, dark-haired, toned like prehistory put him to work, he carries out a platter of the host's hors d'oeuvres with a perfect pearly grin. He's full of stories. His? A mystery. They say he's left both men and women shattered. Fluorescent late nights could not engineer him. His conversation pleases everyone. Art, sports, wine, music, travel, it doesn't matter. And his name? More pleasing than a pseudonym. He's made of crystal. He's blinding in the sun. Fear him. The next poem I'm going to read is called Outcropping. And it's just a reflection of a day I was doing dishes and thinking about the sort of arrangement in the sink. So, Outcropping. The shale-hued baking pan, shorn of broccoli, wedged upwards, hides today's archaeology with almost geologic accuracy. Yes, only a few utensils have slipped to the bottom, rabbits in the sink's Precambrian, to fool some modern Haldane into faith. This mess isn't beautiful, but that it stands astounds, as if there was design behind this Le Chevier I hesitate to touch. I don't use gloves. Limousine liberal that I am, I have organic dish soap, citrus scented and refreshing to nose and hand. Just below the Holocene are bits of crust from a ham sandwich and splashes of mustard. I can recreate the lunch from evidence, except the cup is upside down, the liquid lost. Finally, I lift the plate, flip it and rinse it, and gently place the artifact with the others in the drying rack. The steak knives are last, frayed bits of sacrifice still in their teeth. Done, I see a perfect emptiness, a whole history erased from the basin. Though thirsty, I refuse a glass of water. I don't even pour my beer out of the can. My next poem is Snow Day with Oranges. I'm a teacher in Newton, and yeah, one day I was sitting at my coffee table and just kind of imagining on a snow day, I was looking out and thinking about, summer and oranges and wishing for something like that. And my mind just kind of wandered. And so this poem is a reflection of that. Snow day with oranges. I learn about the energy market to win an internet argument with a user named Fartman69. I lose. I play Risk online with friends. One makes the Princess Bride joke, and I don't laugh because in the game, they're all land wars. I lose. I print scholarly articles that I won't read. I watch the last 3 minutes of a Yukon game on YouTube. They lose. I sit and try to sketch the trees in my backyard, but instead I imagine the Arch of Constantine. In front is a ring of fire, out of which a white tiger leaps at Mickey Mouse. I am riding that tiger, though I look different astride him. Big muscles and flowing hair like He-Man, and I carry the power sword in one hand and a copy of Keats in the other. I make lunch. I eat oranges. I become obsessed with finding beautiful pictures of the dead. I fall in love first with Maud Feely, then Helene Anna Held, then an unnamed Creole woman posed like a Fayum mummy portrait, and then I fall in love with one of the mummy portraits backed by gold. I imagine I've stolen the DeLorean to go back and meet her. Her name is Berenice, and I think of Callimachus. I can use this device to visit him and bring back some lost work. Part of me thinks I'll make some money like Biff, but no one cares about Callimachus anymore, and without gas, the DeLorean is as useless as a rotten orange. I bet on the next emperor and win big. I avoid Pompeii. I make up stories about the future. There are flying cars, I tell her. I explain a car. I participate in the lioness and the cheese grater. I watch our children play among the reeds and tell them that Cleopatra is closer to us in time than she is to the pyramids. They are unimpressed. I make a Prince Albert in a can joke. Nobody laughs. I feel at home for the first time in years. I age and watch my children become merchants. It is wonderful to watch them fall in love. One daughter-in-law works in a pub. The beer is bad, sour, yeasty, and flat. I drink it. I'm convinced that I am my own ancestor. So the weather here in New England is always shifting, and I feel like we never really get a real day of spring. It's always winter or summer. So this next poem is called Spring Day in Boston. And then I have one more after that. Spring Day in Boston. A spring day in Boston is like that friend you have who always gives you maybes, content to wait for better offers or to read alone. A spring day in Boston is never quite as warm or cool as you think it is, looking up from a heating bill and yearning to take off your socks. When it comes, for real though, that spring day in Boston, along the sidewalks, you'll see rabbits promenading and even high-fiving cats as if Peter Cottontail was just elected president. Along the Charles, a flood of t-shirts, polos, khakis, white skirts, rushing, they don't know where, but letting the spring smudge them with all those sails and with magnolia blossoms into a tsunami of, well, it's Boston. We'll never see another day that crests like this again. This place can only bear so much transcendence before it chokes for air. And then my last poem is the final poem in my collection called Beyond All Change. And the opening line is from Midsummer by William Brunk. Beyond all change. The earth is beautiful beyond all change. I think it's the all that really gets me. Naked trees in a milk white field, or eagles picture still on mountains that cradle the jaws of late leviathans. These are beautiful beyond all change. And I can even see the deep sea beauty of the anglerfish, whose take on love makes true the human lie, flesh of our flesh, blood of our blood. But is the poet right about all change? There will come a time when the bloated sun will drink the rocks and breathe the oceans. When we sit with crows in flaming trees, will we walk hand in hand, admiring the mountains that melt around us? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You took us on an epic surreal journey. and such energy. Terrific reading. Our next reader is Paulette Demaris Turco, who has been a Powow River poet since 2018 and was in fact the editor of the Powow River Poets Anthology 2, published by Able Muse Press last year. And she is the co-organizer of the Powow Poetry Readings, and she was the winner of the 2020 Robert Frost Poetry Award. Paulette, all yours. I'm going to make myself disappear.
Thank you so much, Alfred. I am honored to read selections from the Powow River Poet Anthology 2 among all these esteemed poets in this coffee hour and this whole day. I am grateful to the Powows for their support throughout putting the anthology together, and especially to the editorial board, Rena P. Espaillat, our Powow co-founder, Alfred Nicole, our host, and he was editor of the first Powow anthology, and Jean L. Krieling, who you heard read this morning, and to our publisher, Alexander Peppel, founder and editor-in-chief of Able Muse Press. Thank you so much for all your mentoring that made this possible. So that you can hear many of the anthology's 28 Powow voices, this morning I will read shorter poems by Powows not among this morning's readers, who also have wonderful poems in this anthology. And I'll include poems read most often at the 14 readings that promoted the anthology. I'll read the poems in the order that they appear, beginning with the dedication poem by David Berman, in whose memory the anthology is dedicated. And of course, I should thank Leslie Mansour, who wrote the introduction to the anthology, and Catherine Chandler and Dick Davis for their wonderful back cover reviews. The dedication poem by David Berman. The effect of hearing the sublime. Odysseus, who heard the sirens sing, was not enraptured by another thing he heard from human lips. Fools muttering and golden sounds that proved the flutist's skill, which other men said gave their hearts a thrill, to him were equally dislikable. He knew that he would never hear again the sounds he would have died for, had his men been able to hear what he said to them, which was steer toward the music, though it means we shall not land upon familiar scenes, nor want to, once this music intervenes. Next poem I will read is a wonderful one by David Davis, who we all miss so much. Dawn. The early morning flaring of the skies roars overhead as dawn grows out of black. Through the dilated pupils of my eyes, the colors strike my nerves, and farther back inside my grayish convoluted brain, the neurons fire, the sweet endorphins flow. I wonder what advantages we gain by being so affected by this show. Science can't explain the way dawn feels. It's not the goal of natural selection. No other species sees these reds and kneels and looks inside itself for like perfection. To other animals, it's simply light. Dawn's a human word and human sight. The next poem is something you might not have thought of before either, by M. Frost Delaney. What Joseph might have said. So never mind that, what Jesus do? He preached, he healed, he saved. We've got him pegged. It's Joseph who's the mystery man. It's true. He never contemplated, spoke, or begged. See, he was blessed in dreams by angels speak. When Mary came home pregnant, they told Joe it was the work of God. And being meek, old Joe took her in and watched her grow. When angels told him, flee, he packed his kin, whisked them away until the coast was clear. And when the hitman, Herod, was all in, the angel said, go home. Joe didn't fear. But what was it that Joseph could have thought? Oy, Gewalt, such a life I've got. Next poem by our beloved Rena P. Esbayat, 90 this year. After. Of all my images of you, is this or that the one to keep? The sick old man I washed and fed and diapered like a child and eased to sleep with morphine and kiss. Young, playful father, matter, artisan, teacher, author of letters to the press in which your conscience spoke, unreconciled to the denial of justice. Mandolin strummer who chose me for a wife. Soldier, home from the front, aged, though still less than 21, and aching to begin, given this second chance at life. Your life. You gave yourself to me with ring and vow. I kept all of you then. I mean to now. Now a poem by A.M. Juster. Fugitive Son. The Japanese mourn children they abort. In Shinto shrines, they pick a figurine to represent the life that they cut short. They bow, then slide a folded note between the sandalwood and jade, as if a soul that never loved a face could now forgive, or any act of penance could control unwanted visits from a fugitive. I never picked a message I could send or bargained for forgiveness. There was none. Although I know my boy does not intend more pain, he asks about the nameless son we lost 3 months before he was conceived. I have no words to tell him how we grieved. On a much lighter note, a wonderful poem by Joan Alice Wood Kimball after Christian Wyman. Rhymes from a river. A stream so blue it mimics the sky. A dawn, a golden scar. A chain of mallards drifting by. A chain of geese afar. A willow shading bloated spill above a quick mink's wake. a tethered rowboat, not quite still, a glint of water snake, a tree crown shading early light, a red root sucking mud, a sap vein coursing its full height above the river flood. A human touch, a dot protrudes, an angle thrusting out, a wooden stage for solitude, a span to nurture doubt. And a wonderful poem by Alfred Nicole that I would like to read for the people of Ukraine. One day, we walked in light and shade along the lichened wall. No task at hand and nothing planned. The poplar branches swayed and Finlay chased his ball. And something made us smile and something else again. Nothing less than happiness and good to last a while. Enough to last till when this simple summer day of not too much to do may be the one we look back on when years have swirled away and days like these are few. I will read Late Harvest by Tony Treadway. Late Harvest. The berries that withstand the frost, if they endure at all, have liquored juice and puckered flesh, unlike the fruit of fall. They're hanging in the garden's ruin until some hand or wing can part the crumpled, mildewed leaves and grasp the precious thing. And a poem for spring finally arriving, poem of mine, Work or Play. What draws me to the soil in May? When jonquils, yellow trumpets fade, I wear loose clothes to dig all day. I could be sipping lemonade. Instead, I shape the yews with shears, wear visored cap and cotton socks, mix compost, loom, and sweat salt tears. I tear through roots and toss small rocks. I choose my plants for shade or sun, form tiers, mix textures, spans of bloom. Plant chives and basil just for fun, French marigolds where I find room. Memorial Day, my view, once plain, is crowned by rainbows after rain. And for my closing poem by Anton Yakovlev, Ask Anyone. Ask anyone who lived in Soviet times. It was at night that people went away. Faint blood in basements, vague rumors of crimes. Ask anyone who lived in Soviet times. Quiet black Volgas gliding past stop signs, limbs sticking out of trucks at break of day. Ask anyone who lived in Soviet times. It was at night that people went away. Thank you to the Powows. Thank you to all of you for listening, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Paulette, for your generosity in reading the poems of your fellow Powows with such expression to make each of them, you've made each of them your own. Nice work. All right, so last, but certainly not least of our readers this morning is Deborah Warren, whose work has appeared in the New Yorker, the Paris Review, Poetry, the Yale Review, and she published 2 new books in 2021. One of them titled Strange to Say, Etymology for Serious Entertainment, and a book of poems titled Connoisseurs of Worms. Both books are available from Paul Dry Books.
Well, I'm really glad to be here, and big thanks to Alfred, who worked like a galley slave, even though he doesn't show it, getting us all together. The first poem I'm going to read is called Mole. Most animals aren't really generalists, with the exception of the human being, who doesn't really have much of a niche. Mole. Earth is his occupation, and the mole works the turf in his native breaststroke, swimming hallways into the sod. A geonaut supreme and connoisseur of worms. I've heard him breaking roots an inch beneath my soul, and seen how the subterranean specialist carves out for himself a single, simple role. I envy the expertise he brings to bear on dirt, the narrow office he was given. As for me, my habitat is thought, where I grope and sweat and scrabble out a living, forced to prove up here in a windy lair, as invisible as the moles, that there exists an animal who can dig a hole in the air. The next is a little bit different. It's about a marriage. It's about a marriage that took place in the 6th century between two people in the Gepid tribe that was in northern Italy. And I think it may be true because it's too odd to be false. Alboin and the Princess Rosamond. Alboin killed the Gepid king and took the daughter for a wife. Their marriage was like any other. He had issues, lying, brawling, grassy teeth. She would have loved to have it formally annulled. It wasn't for philandering that Rosamond finally took his life. It wasn't his stink. She wasn't bothered by his abuse of alcohol. What galled her was his habit of drinking from her father's skull. The next poem is a poem about prophecy. I am fascinated in fact, I wrote a chapter of a book about different methods that have been used for prophecy over human history. This particular one is called Gelomancy, divination based on the interpretation of laughter. The world, in the pressure of creation, atoms at its core colliding, shook with their reverberations, shudders its surface into fissures, split its sides, and laughed. And where the laughter left a grotto, crouches a hag who drinks the sulfide in a volcanic draught. To her interpreters, she utters truth. The sulfur priestess squats and, sucking from the earth its cold, up-seeping exhalations, babbles her intoxication, burps out into cachinnations, croons and chuckles up the future, oracles of mirth. Okay, this is another weird story that I do not think is true. It's about a painting called The Translation of the House of Loreto. And here's the description. Maybe it's I don't know if I wrote it, it's an epigraph. In 1291, the Virgin's house at Nazareth was miraculously transported by angels to escape the victorious Muslim armies. It came to rest at Loreto on the Adriatic coast of Italy. Look at the picture, totally insane. A house ups from the earth and comes to rest intact as a virgin, a continent away. You bet it takes a miracle to explain. And of all the ones I've heard, this is the best. A pair of angels shows up to convey a building on their fingertips. Okay, shifting a house a couple of countries west, I know one thing you can be sure about. A job like this, you're looking at a crane. No wonder they found it cheapest and easiest to hire a couple of angels to carry it out. The next one is called Pressure. Go to the page. Okay, this is actually a carpe diem poem suggesting that we better gather our rosebuds while we may and not mess around with unhappy things in life. Pressure. Put a little pressure and heat on rock, give it time, and shale turns into slate. It's the same with calcium carbonate, slowly reinventing itself as chalk. Limestone's in no hurry. It started to harden during the lower Jurassic into marble. Graphite spends millennia on diamond, the luxury of eons. At any rate, slow or slower, they move in mineral time with plenty of leisure for maturing late. Nice for them. I have a different clock, skin shallow. Animals can't afford to wait. I have never sent an anonymous Valentine or even an anonymous letter. Plus, it's a lot harder this day and age when we mostly communicate by email. But this is one about a woman who sent an anonymous Valentine. Sending a card to a guy I barely know comes on strong, even for a Valentine. Why let you know I'm thinking about you? So I'm sending it unsigned. You can make up a woman when you get it. Don't put February in her bones. Give her a body younger and a little better than my own. Fabricate for the faceless girl who sent it, skin, eyes, hair. And if I do confess, the card's from me, not the figure you've invented, and you're unimpressed, you can keep the hot exotic who came on like a holiday in the heart of winter. She's ideal for you, if, that is, she ever comes your way. The next one is a dream. Now, usually it's deadly boring when someone wants to talk to you about a dream, but this was a real dream, and it expresses how I feel about a certain person. The name of the person in the poem was Ellen Bright. Ellen Bright. Before I quite woke up, she flitted in. Not much more than her name, but in a dream, a cameo appearance is enough, and I saw everything I needed to know. The main thing was that Ellen had come to stay. The type who takes the dead lamp and rewires it, gets around to seeing Mary Jo, the hospice visit I've been blowing off, knows how to work the idiot TV, also the jumper cables, makes sorbet. Ellen was here. She was someone I'd admire. We complement each other as a team. Maybe we wouldn't actually be friends. She'd be too busy. And it occurs to me how much I would dislike her anyway. I have a clock striking in my kitchen, which tells me we're done here, but many thanks to all of you for sticking around.
You said that you didn't believe in the story of the transported house, you know, lifting up, but you just did that to all of us. You know, you lifted up our houses and brought us to a lot of good places. All right, so that brings to a close our 17th annual, but only second virtual muffinless breakfast with the poets. I hope that we have whet your appetites for a full menu of terrific poetry throughout the day. Take care, wishing you showers of inspiration, and may you always forget your umbrella. Take care.